Throughout my life, my parents never hid how much they preferred my sister. While she was praised for everything, I was ridiculed for even existing. At 18, I left home carrying only pain and the certainty that I would never have their love. 5 years later, when I married the man of my dreams, I decided to invite them, but what they did in the middle of the party was incredibly cruel. They publicly humiliated me in front of everyone. What they didn't know was that I owned the company where my father worked. And at that moment, the truth came out humiliatingly for them. What happened next left all the guests in shock. Hello, welcome to the Amazing Stories channel. Like and subscribe to this channel, enjoy, and turn on notifications. Comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to leave a heart in your comment. Since I was little, I've learned to swallow harsh words in silence. I grew up in a house where the sound of my sister's laughter was music to my parents' ears, while my presence always seemed out of place. If she got a decent grade in school, there was a celebration with cake. If I got a good grade, I heard a dry, "It's your duty." When I said I wanted to be an architect, my mother laughed and said, "You need talent for that, dear. You should have thought of something simpler." My name was forgotten on Christmas cards, in picture frames on the bookshelf, in compliments from family friends. I was a middle-class child, the one who served only as a foil for the others' brilliance. My sister Laura was always the center of attention. Beautiful, intelligent, and smiling, according to my parents, she was perfect in every way. When I failed the entrance exam twice, they blamed the board. When I passed the first time, they told me I should thank my luck. The cooperation was constant, unnecessary, and cruel. And I, trying not to get hurt, pretended that nothing affected me, but inside it hurt a lot. The years passed, and at 18, I reached my limit. On my birthday, my mother gave me a used blouse from my sister with her name still on the tag. My father didn't even look at me. The only person who congratulated me was the neighbor across the street. It was at that moment, sitting alone in the backyard while the three of them laughed at Laura's joke about how I'd always had weird taste in clothes, that I decided it was time to leave. With the money I'd saved doing odd jobs and selling candy in college, I rented a simple little room in a boarding house where the hallways smelled musty and the neighbors talked loudly into the wee hours. But for the first time in my life, that space was all mine. No one laughed at me there, no one called me boring or the odd one out. I maintained basic contact with my parents and Laura. Cold calls on mandatory dates, short messages with forced emojis. There was never any regret on their part. They never asked if I needed anything, they never visited me. Over the next 5 years, a lot changed. I worked, studied, fell, and got up again. I made difficult choices, knocked on doors until someone believed in me. And little by little, I built a solid path without anyone knowing. I never felt the need to shout to the world what I was doing, I just kept walking. But I still carried an old, closely guarded pain, the wound of never having been loved as a daughter. That's when I met Raphael, a man unlike anything I'd ever experienced. He listened to me with all his heart, looked me in the eyes, and respected me silently. He never needed to tell me he loved me every day because every gesture of his spoke volumes. Raphael saw in me everything my family never wanted to see, and it was with him that I began to dream of a new life, a new story. When he proposed, I cried with emotion. Not just for the proposal itself, but for understanding that I would finally have the chance to start a new family, one where love would be the foundation, not competition. Despite all the hurt, I decided to invite my parents and sister to the wedding, not out of affection, but out of respect. I thought perhaps they would be surprised to see who I'd become. Maybe they would understand, even if it was too late, how much they'd made me suffer. Raphael supported my decision, even though he was wary. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare me for what would happen at that party. A night that should have been marked by love was instead marked by something no one would ever forget. A night when the truth came to light with such force that not even those who had ignored me my entire life could escape the weight of regret. Little did they know that their ridiculed daughter held power in her hands they never imagined. And when that power was revealed, the laughter ceased, the arrogance evaporated. And shame washed over every cruel word they had spoken, because there that night everything would change forever. The wedding invitation was sent with a heavy heart. I wrote my parents' and Laura's names with a steady hand, even though my heart wavered. I still remember the day I left the envelope at the front door of the house where I grew up, the same house where I heard so many times, "You're not good enough." I stood across the street, staring at the kitchen window where my mother had so often laughed at my clothes or the way I spoke. For a moment, I almost backed out, but I took a deep breath. It wasn't for them, it was for me. The reply came 2 days later. My mother sent me a curt message, received. We'll be there, no exclamation point, no question, no emotion. Laura responded with a mocking expression, the kind that says it's a miracle. That was it, the same contempt disguised as civility. Raphael wanted to know if I regretted it. No, I replied, they need to be there, not for me. But for all that was to come, in the following days, I immersed myself in the wedding preparations with more emotion than I ever imagined. I chose simple yet meaningful flowers. The sunflowers represented the light I found far from them. The dress wasn't ostentatious, but it was perfect. A design that outlined the body with elegance, without ostentation, but with presence. That's how I felt now, secure, without having to prove anything to anyone. During meetings with suppliers, I noticed how Raphael looked at me silently, proudly. He knew my story, every bit of it. And even in the face of pain, he never saw me as weak. On the contrary, he said my courage to move forward was what most enchanted him. A week before the wedding, my mother called me. An unexpected call after years of silence. I answered, thinking perhaps something had changed, but all it took was hearing her voice to realize everything was the same. I just wanted to confirm, is the stake really in that simple place that was on the invitation? Yes, Mom, an outdoor space just like I always dreamed of. I replied, trying to remain calm. I just hope it's not another embarrassment. You know how you like to do things differently, and sometimes, well, it doesn't always work out. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream, but I did neither. I just breathed and told her she could go or not, it was her decision. And I hung up before hearing another provocation. Laura, meanwhile, was posting in direct messages on social media, mocking parties with tacky sunflowers and thrift store dresses. I knew it was about me. But I didn't care because I knew what I was doing and who I was now. The day before the wedding, I sat on the couch with Raphael holding our rings. He hugged me and said, tomorrow you'll close a cycle and start a new one. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side. Even if I fall, I'll pick you up, I cried. Not out of sadness, but because, for the first time, I felt part of something where love was real, where no one ridiculed me for being who I was. On the morning of the wedding, I woke before sunrise. I opened the window and saw the first rays of light scorching the sky orange. I put on a white robe, drank a quiet coffee, and listened to my heartbeat peacefully. There was no nervousness, just certainty. I knew that day would be remarkable. Not only because I was marrying a man I loved, but because something inside me told me it would also be the day all masks would fall. When I arrived at the ceremony venue, everything was exactly as I'd imagined. The garden was delicately decorated, the white chairs lined up neatly, and in the background, the cake table adorned with wildflowers. My guests were beginning to arrive. Friends who had supported me through difficult times, coworkers, people who had followed my journey away from my family. And among the happy faces, I saw the three of them arriving, my father in a dark suit and a frowning expression, my mother in a flashy dress and a critical expression, and Laura with exaggerated heels and a look that mixed disdain with curiosity. No smile, no words, they just looked at me like I was a stranger. But in that moment, I realized that was exactly what I was to them, a stranger, because they never bothered to really get to know me. They never wanted to know about my dreams, my pain, my achievements. They were there not for me but for pride, to observe, to judge. Maybe even to mock, but they didn't know that that night they would be the ones being watched, and I, for the first time, would have the floor. The ceremony began promptly at 4 in the afternoon. The sun lay over the garden like a golden embrace. I walked up to the altar with firm steps, feeling the eyes follow me. But of all people, I avoided looking at the three of them, my father, my mother, and my sister, not out of fear but by choice. That moment was mine. And they wouldn't have the power to take him away from me. Soft music played, and Raphael, his eyes brimming with tears, smiled when he saw me. It was as if all the wounds of the past were sealed in that moment. In my vows, I spoke about love, about rebuilding, about being strong even in the face of abandonment. My words touched many, except those who should have been most moved. My parents maintained the same cold expression, and Laura looked bored, fiddling with her phone while I swore allegiance to the man I'd chosen for my life. The ceremony continued beautifully. After the exchange of rings, everyone applauded, and we were finally declared husband and wife. Emotions were overwhelming. My friends were crying, and even some coworkers hugged me affectionately. But from the three of us, nothing, no smiles, no gestures, just distant looks. And that didn't faze me anymore. In the hall where the party would take place, the atmosphere was different, lighter, more relaxed. Guests spread out among the tables, the dance floor, and the outdoor spaces with lanterns strung between the trees. The music began to set the tone for the first steps. Raphael and I took a few photos, then walked among the tables, thanking everyone for coming. It was then that I began to notice something different. My father seemed restless. He kept glancing at one of the guests with a confused expression, as if trying to confirm something he didn't want to believe. The man, an elegant gentleman with gray hair and a serene demeanor, was chatting with a group of executives near the buffet area. It was Roberto, the CEO of the company where my father had worked for almost 20 years. Laura, who had already had too much to drink, paced back and forth, telling the guests that it was a miracle the party had worked out and that her sister never had good taste, but this time it wasn't so bad. Some guests laughed awkwardly, others looked away. My mother, as always, made a point of observing every detail with restrained contempt. She whispered to a distant aunt that everything was fine for those who have no standards. She tried to maintain a superior air, but her discomfort with the presence of important people was evident. Perhaps she was realizing that this event was not just a simple wedding, but something bigger. It was during dinner that the mood began to change. The master of ceremonies announced that the bride and groom's parents could, if they wished, give a short speech. Raphael's mother stood up sweetly, spoke moving words about her son and how happy she was to have me as her daughter-in-law. The crowd applauded, then unexpectedly my father stood up too, raising his glass with an expression that blended arrogance and defiance. An uncomfortable silence fell. "I want to take this moment to say a few words," he began. "After all, it's rare to see our daughter." He paused deliberately, looking at me as if each word were poison. "I want to accomplish something." Some guests glanced at each other. Raphael frowned. I remained silent, staring at my father. "Our failed daughter who never knew and never will know what success is," he added, raising his glass. "How lucky you are to have gotten married. Because let's face it, this is already so much more than we expected." The room seemed to freeze for a moment. Laura laughed out loud and with a mocking tone added, "It was really lucky. To think someone agreed to marry her is jaw-dropping." A buzz spread among the guests. My heart was pounding, but my expression didn't change. I looked at Raphael, who held my hand tightly, and then, at that exact moment, the unexpected happened. Roberto, the CEO, got up from his desk. He walked calmly over to my father, stopping right next to him. My father, visibly nervous, tried to maintain his composure. "Excuse me," Roberto said firmly. "I think I'm hearing too much nonsense for a night of celebration." Everyone fell silent. People's breath seemed held. "Did you know, Paulo, that your daughter, whom he pointed directly at me, is the owner of the company where you and I work?" The glass slipped from my father's hands, falling to the floor with a crash. My mother paled. Laura put her hand to her mouth, unsure of what to say. The smiles faded, the air seemed thicker. And in that instant, I realized the moment had arrived. The moment I'd waited years for. The moment when the truth would finally stare them in the face without mercy. For a second, there was absolute silence. The entire room, previously filled with music, conversation, and laughter, now seemed shrouded in an invisible veil of shock. Everything stopped. Glasses suspended in midair, cutlery halfway to their mouths, gazes frozen toward the center of the room. My parents and sister, until then proud in their arrogance, were petrified. My father, Paulo, took a step back, his eyes wide as if he were witnessing a nightmare. She tried to blurt something out, but her voice failed her. My mother, paler than I'd ever seen her, lowered her head, unable to support her own weight. And Laura looked like a broken doll, her smile still plastered to her face, but her eyes lost in an abyss of disbelief. "Owner," he managed to whisper finally. She's the owner," Roberto nodded without looking away. "Yes, Paulo." She discreetly purchased 72% of the company's shares, first as an anonymous investor. Then when she learned you were part of the management team, she asked us for a description. And we respect it because, contrary to what you just said, she knows what she's doing, and very well at that. People around her murmured, somewhere between amazement and admiration. Many looked at me with new expressions, no longer of pity but of respect. A quiet pride began to take hold of me, not for the power or the money, but for having endured, for having achieved everything without stepping on anyone. And now, finally, to show the truth, Raphael squeezed my hand and looked at me with teary eyes. "Go, love." "It's your turn." Then I stood up. My footsteps echoed in the room as I approached the table where my father was still trying to understand what was happening. I stopped in front of him. He avoided looking at me. Laura, still open-mouthed, looked to her mother for support, who now kept her eyes fixed on the ground. Funny, I began, my voice firm, not shouting, that you always said I was a disgrace to the family. The weird one, the one with no future. And today, here, in front of all our friends and guests, you did it again. Only this time you exposed yourselves alone. My father opened his mouth to try to say something, but I held up my hand, asking for silence. I left that house at 18 after years of hearing that I wasn't enough. And do you know why I left? Because I understood that your love was conditional. It was for those who did everything your way. I wasn't like Laura, and for that I was ridiculed. My mother, now with discreet tears, still silent, could barely look up. But what you never knew, I continued, is that all that pain turned into strength. Every time I was humiliated, I turned it into fuel. I worked day and night. I studied alone, I fell, I got up, I made difficult choices. And yes, I built something you can't even imagine. I approached Roberto and looked at him with respect. Thank you for keeping my identity a secret for so long. I needed this to see how far people would go, and they went too far. I turned to my father again. Starting Monday, Paulo, you will be dismissed from the company, fairly, without humiliation, because even with everything, I'm more human than you were with me. A new silence fell, but this time it was a heavy silence carrying the weight of shame, revelation, and regret. Laura jumped to her feet. That's a joke, you can't do that. You are, a woman you never wanted to see, I replied. And now maybe it's too late. She turned to her father. Dad, say something, tell him this isn't real. My father said nothing. He sat down, defeated, as if all the air had been knocked out of him. The mask of superiority he'd worn his entire life had finally slipped. And what was left, there was just a proud man destroyed by his own words. Raphael, beside me, put his arm around my waist and pulled me close. The master of ceremonies, unsure of what to do, tried to get the party going again with some light music. But nothing would ever be the same again. The guests looked at me differently. Some women came up to hug me. A lady told me, you were much stronger than anyone here imagines. My mother tried to get up. She came to me, her eyes filled with tears. Daughter, not me, I interrupted, not today. Today is my day, you've already taken up too much of the stage. And so I walked away, head held high, as my parents and sister saw for the first time who I really was. The party continued, but the atmosphere never quite returned. There was still music, lights, and smiles, but among the guests there was also a new kind of silence, the silence of respect. Of reflection, of surprise at what they witnessed. My parents and sister stayed for another hour, but they didn't touch anything else, neither food nor drink. Laura remained seated, staring into space, as if still waiting to wake from a nightmare. My mother wept softly, occasionally wiping her tears with a cloth napkin, and my father, he became a voiceless man that night. Not because they couldn't speak, but because for the first time they didn't know what to say. When they finally decided to leave, they didn't say goodbye to anyone. They walked through the guests with their eyes downcast, heads bowed, as if carrying the weight of years of arrogance on their shoulders. I saw Laura look at me before leaving. There was hurt, but more than that, a certain despair. The certainty that, from that moment on, the world she knew had crumbled. That night after the party, I sat with Raphael on the couch in our new home. We kicked off our shoes, ate cake with our hands, and laughed a little to ease the tension. But inside, I was reliving every word we'd said. Not out of regret, but because I knew that with that exposure, something else would come, something they wouldn't let slide, and it did. The following Monday, as promised, my father was called to a meeting with the company's legal department. No scandals, no spotlight. He was informed of the termination respectfully, with all his rights guaranteed. It was the only time Roberto sent me a personal message, and he silently accepted it. He signed it and left without looking back. That same afternoon, I received an email. It was from my mother. Daughter, I know you may no longer want to hear my voice or read my words. But I have to try. Your father and I were shocked, not just with surprise, but with shame. We didn't know your journey, what you built, who you became. I was wrong, daughter, a lot. And I don't know if there's any forgiveness for that, but if there's ever a chance, I'd like to try to really get to know you. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want that request to be another empty gesture like so many others in the past. The wound was still too raw to accept a last-minute bandage. A few days later, Laura showed up at my work, yes, at my building, unannounced. She was haggard, without makeup, her face puffy as if she hadn't slept in days. The security guard warned me and I let her go up. I was surprised by this, even by myself. But part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. I know you hate me, were her first words as she walked into the room. And I didn't come here to ask for a job or to justify myself. Just to let you know I understand. She remained standing, clutching her bag to her chest like a shield. Understand what? I asked, maintaining my calm demeanor. Everything. I understood how cruel I was, how much I laughed at your pain. How much fun I had with mom and dad's jokes at your expense. And I also understood that while you struggled, I hid behind privilege. And you know what the biggest lesson was? What? That you didn't need to take revenge on anyone. You just showed who you were, and that was enough to destroy our family's pride, she cried. And for the first time, I didn't feel pleasure in her pain. I felt pity because now she understood. But maybe it was already too late. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, he continued, because I know I don't deserve it. I just came to say that now, when I look at you, I see someone I wish I had been. Strong, true, capable. I was silent for a moment. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and took a deep breath. That visit had affected me more than I cared to admit. Laura, time will tell what can and cannot be rebuilt. Today, I still need to keep my distance. But thank you for coming without a mask. She nodded, bowed her head, and left without another word. That night when I got home, I found Raphael in the kitchen making tea. He looked at me and saw from my face that something had happened. Did she come to you? He asked. Yes. And it was strange but necessary. What now? He wanted to know. Now I rest. Because even though the world is trying to make noise, I've finally found silence here inside. In the following days, my mother's calls intensified. She left messages, tried to arrange meetings. My aunt and uncle also started contacting me, saying she wasn't eating properly, that she regretted it, that she cried every day. But I needed to take it slow. For years, I'd waited for a genuine connection. Now I couldn't accept crumbs of affection driven by guilt. Even so, something was beginning to mature inside me, the idea that perhaps in the future it would be possible to take a step forward. Not to erase the past because it shaped me, but to stop it from guiding my every step from now on. What I didn't expect was that, even after everything, my parents would still try to confront me in a way that would make it clear their pride hadn't died. It had just receded. And this new, unexpected, and treacherous encounter would test not only my strength but also my compassion. 3 weeks after the wedding, the calm that had settled into my life seemed like a sign that, finally, everything had settled down. I continued working with Finco, with the company growing steadily, and Raphael was the partner who proved to me every day that true love existed. But the peace wouldn't last. One Friday night, I received a message from my secretary. Your parents and sister were here earlier, wanting to see you. They said it was urgent. My stomach churned. Not out of fear, but because something told me it wasn't regret that was driving them. It was something else. Wounded pride doesn't accept defeat without a fight. I decided to ignore it. If it were truly urgent, they would have looked again. And they did. The following Monday, around 6 in the evening, when most of the employees had already left, there was a loud knock on the glass door of the main entrance. My assistant was no longer there. I was the one who answered, and there they were. My parents and Laura. They walked in like they owned the place. My father was wide-eyed, my mother had her nose in the air again, and Laura was dressed in a blazer that screamed an attempt at dignity. Can we talk? My father said, not waiting for an answer, already entering the meeting room. I sat at the head of the table, maintaining my posture. They sat opposite, side by side, just like in the old days, united in arrogance. You've already humiliated us enough, he began. You've already shown the whole world that you won, you've already exposed us. He's already made us pay dearly, and he still wants more, my mother finished. What else do you want? For us to crawl? I don't want anything else from you, I replied. I just want distance. Distance is easy when you're on top, Laura veronized. But look, your mom's sick, dad's out of work, and me, well, my life's turned upside down. And can you fix this? You can, but you don't want to. Because it's not my place, I said, looking at them one by one. No one here cared when I left home empty-handed, when I ate bread with old margarine for dinner, when I cried in secret because I was treated like trash. Now you want my help, now you want compassion. My father punched the table, making my pen bounce. If you don't help, you'll regret it. You can have money, you can have a business, but you don't have a family. We are your family. I rose from the chair slowly, keeping my gaze fixed on him. You were my biological family. But they chose not to be my emotional family. They chose to treat me like a shadow, and now that the light has returned to me, they want to bask in it. My mother tried to soften, daughter, perhaps we committed excesses, high, bitter. You destroyed my self-esteem, my childhood, my youth, and now you come demanding that I save you? Laura, nervous, also stood up. Listen here, you're thinking too much of yourself. You think that just because you have money you can boss everyone around. You're arrogant? No, Laura. I'm not arrogant, I've just learned to recognize my worth. And that bothers you because now I'm no longer the ladder for you to climb. Silence, a cutting silence like a razor blade about to descend. Then I took a deep breath and walked to the living room door. You can leave now, you'll regret this, my father growled. I opened the door. I'd rather regret cutting toxic ties than remain trapped in a lifelong hurt. They left silently, for the first time without the certainty that they could manipulate me. Without the arrogance that had plagued them for decades, and without ground, that night I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of liberation. Because even though blood unites us, respect and love are choices, and I chose to love myself. I chose to leave behind the burden of trying to please someone who never wanted to see me happy. Months later, my mother sent me one last letter, not by email, but handwritten. A long letter full of words that only make sense when you no longer expect anything else. You were right about everything. We spent our entire lives exalting one daughter and ridiculing the other. Now we see that it wasn't a matter of luck or bad luck, but of effort, character, and truth. You built on your own what we destroyed in you. And yet you gave us a chance to be present at your wedding. We hurt you publicly, and you forgave us only with the truth. I don't know if there's still time for us to be something, but if you ever allow it, I'd just like to be someone who respects you, even if only from afar. I kept the letter, I didn't reply, I didn't need to. Because certain pains don't need an explanation, just silence and peace. Today I live peacefully. I have a company that makes me proud, a husband who loves me, friends who respect me, and a past that doesn't define me, only strengthens me. My parents and sister, they're still trying to cope with reality. But that part of the story now belongs to them. Mine is different, and in it I'm the protagonist. If this story touched your heart as much as it did ours, don't forget to like it. It really helps our channel reach more people. And if you're not yet a subscriber, subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the moving stories we post here. Share this video with your friends and family, especially with someone who needs to understand the value of overcoming obstacles and courage. And now I want to hear from you. If you were in this daughter's shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have had the courage to stand up to a family that always humiliated you? Tell me in the comments, I'd love to hear your opinion. And please tell me which city you're watching this video from. I'll share it in the comments and leave a special heart for you. Your support is what motivates us to continue bringing stories like this. Thank you so much for being here.